Hey everybody, welcome to another painting video. This time around we're going to be painting Cerbero from Black Rose Wars, so let's get started. After getting him primed with gray primer, I picked P3's Quicksilver as my starting point. If you've seen any of the reference art for Cerbero, you know that he's predominantly silver, so picking the right color to begin with is a really crucial step. If you pick a medium to dark silver and then put dark washes on top of that, you're probably going to come out with a dark muddied result in the end. I picked Quicksilver because it's the brightest, shiniest, most brilliant silver I have on the entire paint rack, loaded it into the airbrush, thinned it down, and started putting on my base coats. If you're new to airbrushing, I strongly suggest you thin the paint down, take your time, and put on numerous thin coats. You can always put on more if it's not solid, but if you put it on too heavily, you're going to clog up the detail and you might even get runs or drips on the miniature, and that's going to look horrible. So whether you're using an airbrush or whether you're brushing it on by hand, make sure you take your time, slow and steady, and for a monochrome color scheme like this, you really want to make sure that you've got a good foundation moving forward. So just take your time and make sure you twist them, turn them upside down, look for the hard to reach places like behind the hair, between the ribs and the arms, under the swords. Make sure you don't miss any places because it's going to be really difficult to go back and touch up later. It's also funny that by now he looked like he was a pewter miniature and he should weigh a ton. Anyhow, we're going to let him dry overnight and we'll be back. So the next morning I moved him over to the painting table and was still surprised that he didn't weigh a ton like a pewter miniature. But anyway, I mixed up a couple drops of Lamium Medium with some Nuln Oil and did a very, very dilute black wash. Now I say dilute because I don't want to put this on too heavy. I can go back and put on more later, but I'm not trying to stain the silver and make it a dark silver. That defeats the last point that I just made about picking a nice bright silver. What I'm doing here is trying to get the detail to pop so that I can differentiate what's what, see where my highlights and shadows are going to fall, and it just helps me pick out some of the detail. Also make sure that you don't let it pool up. If you're new to putting on washes, don't let it pool up in any areas. You don't want thick black areas. You don't want some of the armor filled in jet black. You don't want the eyes on the shoulders to be completely clogged up. Just take your time, put on a nice thin dilute wash, and you'll be surprised how quickly you can see all those details. So now that that wash has dried and I can really see all the detail pop, I also want to start on the hair. I picked P3's Sanguine Base as a starting color here. It's a nice dark maroon color. It's not too dark, but it's going to work well with the other colors I have planned to stack on top of it. So this is one of those times where you want to be super careful. With the work that we did with the silver already, you're not going to want to get red on the shoulders and then have to go back and try to touch it up. And this is one of those places where slow and steady, take your time, and be really careful along the edges of the ears on the helmet or those parts of the cheeks that kind of come back, the ears on the shoulder pauldrons. Be very, very careful because after the washes and the silver, it's going to be difficult to touch up. There's also this sash in the front that when I started, I was trying to go in between all the silver bits, and yeah, you'll see by the end, I was like, no. I just painted the entire sash Sanguine Base, and I'll go back later and pick out the silver bits. There's also this collar, this raggedy piece of scarf around his neck. The majority of it's easy to get, but there are some parts you have to be very careful getting behind those shoulder pauldrons. I can't urge you strongly enough to be careful and not make a mess. But with the hair, the scarf, and the sash done, we're done with Sanguine Base and it's time to move on to the next color. So the next color I picked out was P3's Scorn Red. Any nice medium bright red will do. This for me in a triad of reds made sense for the next step up, and I started trying to catch all the raised edges. Now for the scarf and the sash, I did this with a small brush and just went in and very carefully picked out what I considered to be the raised edges or the very edges along the bottom, and tried to lay this color in, and we're going to put other colors on top of it, so I wouldn't be too meticulous about this, but you can see here I've got that piece around his neck done. So now one of my favorite tricks is Silly Putty. And yeah, I like Silly Putty over Blue Tack because I think Silly Putty is petroleum based in some way. It doesn't stick to the miniatures the way I've had Blue Tack stick before. It comes off really cleanly. I've never had it pull off the paint. And now I can be all kinds of sloppy and nasty with dry brushing the hair. I didn't want to try risking that on right underneath the chin. So for me, doing the scarf by hand paid off. But now, with all the silly putty all over the shoulders and the face, I can be kind of haphazard and get that entire thing on there. So like I said, I started with Sanguine base, I moved to Scorn Red, and the next logical step would be Khador Red base. But I skipped that and I went right up to Khador Red Highlight, which you'll see here, it's kind of an orange color. And I figured if I put this on thin enough and not too heavy, then it's going to give me just the right highlight effect without having to stack 4, 5, 6 different colors. I'm putting it on really light towards the bottom, but a lot heavier towards the top. I'm going to get the sides a little bit, but the under part of that massive ponytail, I'm really not going to worry about. I'm really going to focus most of this Khador Red highlight up around the top. And you can see here when I peel off the silly putty, it comes off almost in one big piece. None of it sticks to the model, and it doesn't pull off any of the paint. Then I went ahead and very carefully tried to put a little bit of that on the scarf, and I'm really happy with those results. I'm glad I didn't go to the next color of red and I hopped over to the pale orange. I think it gives me just the right highlights that I need, especially across the top of the hair and not so much underneath. Next up, there's a few parts that are really easy to miss if you don't know that they're there, and it's some of the brown bits. Now, there's some straps holding his armor plates on, there's a larger one towards the bottom, and there's a slightly smaller one just up above it, but you've got a brown strap on both sides, so make sure you pick those out. And then on the back, there's a few little things. There's a pouch, like a coin purse or gold pouch, whatever. There's another piece of the belt and strap. Like I said, there's the smaller one above the lower one. There's 2 straps on each side and the details in the back, plus the sword hilts. There's not a whole lot of brown, so you can pick almost any color you want. Just make sure you get those bits. It does help break up the silver, and it's going to do wonders in the end. Now that that brown's good and dry, I'm going to come in and I'm going to start to shade it. I grabbed Agrax Earthshade and started putting it on the hilts, but after I put the first coat on and let it dry and tried to get a good overall shade, I really went back numerous times and put it on the bottom of the hilt, and you'll see that as we move forward. Same thing on these straps. The first time across, I did cover the entire strap, but every time I went back to add a little bit more to the hilts, I made sure to go on part of the strap that looks like it's tucked away to almost give more of a shadow in the rear part, like this here. Every time I went back, I did more towards the back and less towards the front. Same thing on the hilts. You can see that I kept coming back across the bottom of the hilt and not so much across the top. This gives that natural shading where the tops are lighter, the bottoms are darker, without you having to go in and paint numerous colors. If you can take some time and slowly layer on the washes, you can get the same effect. Now that I got all the brown shaded, it was time to come back and clean up that sash. The silver that I figured I would just paint over, it was a lot easier for me to come back and pick out the silver later. If you turn your brush sideways, you can use the edge of the brush and really pick out some thin lines if you're really careful. I went ahead and I picked out the edges of all the straps, the buckles at the bottom, these weird triangular or diamond shaped, I guess they're the bottom weights, and the rivets as well. So here you can see the completed sash. It was way easier to pick out the silver than it was to try and paint the red all around it. So that's the one change that I made from my original plan. So now it's time to address the floor. I did do the black on the pedestal off camera. It's just a me thing. I always end up painting part of the pedestal before I should. If you watched my chrono video, you know that I did this rather sporadic kind of different colored stone effect on the floor. I don't remember exactly which grays I used. I was watching TV and only half paying attention. I know I grabbed some darker greenish grays like this one, and then I moved on to a much lighter gray like this one. I think at one point I even just mixed a couple of things that were on my wet palette and made up a couple grays. But for me, I like this non-uniform, really old school looking handmade cobblestone effect. So if this is the effect you want to go with, just pick out numerous different grays, take your time, try to stagger them, don't put one right next to another. After you get the stones done, I picked out, for me, again, if you watch my chrono video, I did the roses black and I didn't like it. So this time I picked out some reference art of dead roses. And it showed me that the stems were a very desaturated, almost like straw looking green. So I picked P3's Thrall Flesh and went out and picked out all the vines. And then after I got the vines done, I know I said I didn't want red roses. I mean, in chrono, I did the roses black and I didn't like it. And I've seen people where they do the vines a bright Crayola green and the roses are a bright Crayola red, and I don't like it. That's just my taste. But what I did notice in that reference art with the desaturated vines was starting with a red on the roses and then putting lots of black washes on top of them. I'll throw that reference photo up here in a minute, but knowing that I was going to go over everything, especially the roses with black, it was okay to go ahead and do kind of a sloppy wash over most of the stone floor and the roses themselves. Now, off camera, I did lots of coverage on the roses. I'm not going to bore you with every single time, every single pass, but I think after, I don't know, like 10 or 12 coats, I got the effect I wanted, and you'll see that here in a minute. But after getting the first pass of the black wash on the floor and the roses done, I went ahead and I grabbed Athonian Camo Shade, and it's a brownish greenish wash. Like if you're rocking secret weapon washes, try baby poop. That could be a good one. Anything that's kind of greenish, brownish, nasty, gross looking is going to be good. Anything too bright green, you're going to go back to that Crayola effect. Anything too dark, like brown, you're getting away from that desaturated green. So pick something that's kind of a greenish brown, and that should serve you well on the vines. And again, like I said, I went over the roses numerous times. I was sitting here watching TV, I'd let it dry, I'd watch TV for 20 minutes, come back, put another coat on here, until I got the roses really, really dark, like the reference photo that I picked out. So here you can see that they were once red, but they're really dead and desaturated, just like the vines. The floor has a good cobblestone effect, and we're coming along. At this point, he's pretty much done, and I think most people would probably stop right here. This would be a really good place. He matches the reference art really well. But if you've ever seen any of my videos in the past from my old channel, you'll know that I have a habit of trying to overcomplicate things. I'd rather aim high and not quite get there than just do the bare minimum, and I have this habit of trying to fail upwards. So I decided there was one more thing that I wanted to do, and that was try to play off the light and shadows on the armor. Now, I am no master painter.
You are right, cabeza de huevo.
But I'm going to try putting some blue highlights across the top of the armor and some brown highlights or shadows, whatever, across the bottom. I'm not trying to do a non-metallic metal. I'm not that good yet. And I'm definitely not trying to do anything beyond my means, but I made a really, really dilute, like 1 drop of that Vallejo blue, that sky blue, to like 10 drops of thinner. And I made numerous passes, really, really faint, really, really light. I think I ended up doing like 12 thin coats of that blue glaze. And if you look down, you can see just enough of it. It's not too prominent, it's not too saturated, it's barely there. At certain angles on the camera, you almost can't even see it, but it's there. When I hold the miniature in my hand, I can see it a little bit better than I can on camera. Maybe the lights are kind of washing it out, but the goal was to have just the slightest bit of blue on the tops, kind of like non-metallic metal, and then a little bit of brown underneath, and that was my way of breaking up all that silver. So getting all the blues in, the next step for me was to try and lay in the browns. And I used a sepia wash, I thinned it way down, and I came in just like I did with the blue. I came in across the bottoms, not everything. Again, I haven't done non-metallic metal successfully, so I wasn't going to try and ruin him. I just wanted to break up all that stark silver. And the reason I emphasized at the beginning staying bright and light and not getting muddy is because if at this point we were too dark and muddied, you wouldn't even see it, or you'd have to put it on so thick, it would look really funny and out of place. So keeping the silver nice and brilliant, nice and bright, it affords me the opportunity to come in and kind of put in some of this diluted blue and diluted brown and try to kind of pull off a little bit of a mirror-y effect to play off that armor. Again, the reference art shows that he's so reflective, he's almost like a walking mirror. So that's kind of why I went in here and broke up all that silver. And yeah, it's not exactly what I'd hoped for, but I'll still call it a win. I think the concept is sound. It's something I definitely want to practice. But it paid off. I'm happy with it. I don't regret doing it. And now I will call Cerbero done. So yeah, here's my completed Cerbero. This footage looks a little funny. I've got a new camera and lighting set up. Forgive it being a little bit on the dark side, but hey, there's nothing wrong with the dark side, right? So I'm really happy with the way he came out. He's got that solid mirror effect from head to toe. He's bright, he's shiny. I did put a gloss varnish over all the armor. With the bright white lights in the photo booth, I think the gloss is kind of washing him out a little bit. But the hair looks great. It's nice and orangey red at the top and kind of a darker red at the bottom. And I did that without having to use any washes or any shading. I just did it by layering those 3 different colors I mentioned earlier. Using the layered washes on the brown to kind of shade it without having to use different colored paints was really advantageous. The desaturated roses and vines on the cobblestone floor with all the different grays, I think that came out great. And yeah, it's motivation for me to work on non-metallic metal to maybe pull this off a little bit more refined. But I think the kind of blue glaze off the tops and the brown glazes on the bottoms was a good choice. For me, my opinion, it breaks up all that silver and I think it plays well. So yeah, here's my completed Cerbero. Hopefully this helps you guys if you want to paint Cerbero to match the reference art, and maybe this will help you. Maybe it'll give you some ideas of your own. But either way, in the end, this was my Cerbero. He was one of the first miniatures I saw that I couldn't wait to paint when I pledged for Black Rose Wars. So now that I've got my channel back up and I'm starting to make new content, this was definitely one of the first things that I wanted to paint. So there he is. I hope you like the way Cerbero came out. I'm really pleased with the results. If you like the way Cerbero came out, do me a favor, hit that like button. If you've got something to add to the conversation, you want to share your thoughts, drop a comment below. Share this video with somebody that might get something out of it. And you know what? If you haven't yet, go ahead and subscribe to Egghead Hobbies because I got a ton of cool stuff coming your way. Now get out of here, man. Go make something. We'll see you in the next video. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.